Rebecca Jernigan, all the way from Oxford, Mississippi.
Okay, got it. I rolled into Poplarville in 1989 to go to the upper elementary school and teach some writing and for sixth graders. And while I was here, of course, I would always tell a story as a part of my teaching. And the next thing I knew, I heard about this group of folks here. And they said, you gotta meet Hattie Gentry. Well, Hattie Gentry was coming out to, I was staying in a little cabin up at Hilltop up a ways, and she came and she got lost trying to find me, and when she finally found me, she took me and we all went over to Gilda Fitzpatrick's, who was the principal then, and there we had some wine and crawdads, and I found out about Poplarville. I've been coming back ever since. A year or two later, though, I went off to the Republic of China. And while I was there, I did a lot of things and I told them a lot of stories. But one day, one of the caretakers of one of the children, a little old woman, came up to me and she said, through an interpreter, because I didn't really speak Chinese, just a little bit, Wo Jiao Idian Haiyu, I can speak a little Chinese now, but anyhow, she said, let me read your fortune. And so she looked at my hand very carefully and she made a little line across it. And I asked my interpreter, what did she say? And she said, you're very lucky. And I said, but why am I lucky? And she looked at me and said to me, because you live in America. So I want to tell you just a tiny bit of story about when I was a little girl. My oldest brother had gone off and joined the Navy. World War II was going on then. He hadn't finished high school, but they accepted them. And so he went to Napa. Actually, he went all over, but mainly he settled as a pharmacist mate in Napa, California. And his job was to work with those veterans who came back shell-shocked. You know, we realized how many of our boys and girls were damaged by the horrors of war. And so he managed to take his classes. They didn't have online then, but somehow they worked it out so that he was finishing his high school diploma. Well, my papa worked for the Illinois Central Railroad, and so Papa had access to passes on the train. Well, my brother Dan was going to be crossing the country, going to Maryland to take one of the victims, shell-shocked victims, there to Bethesda, I think, to the hospital. Well, Papa being he was always maneuvering, my father was. He was trying to figure out a way to get Dan to Memphis, to Whitehaven, Tennessee, where we lived, right there on the state line, for his high school graduation. And he managed to get him from Maryland on the Illinois Central or somehow on the train. And we were all sitting there now. I remember that day my Aunt Petey had lent me some little pearls to wear. I was just about a little girl about 6 years old, and I'm sitting there thinking, my brother Dan's supposed to graduate from high school, but he's all the way in California, but Papa's trying to get him here. And you know what? The boys and girls were standing on the stage of Whitehaven High School. Some of you probably see it when you go into Memphis. It's right there, just off the state line. And they were all in their robes. They're getting their diplomas. Several of the young men in that class had been killed in action, and their names were read, and people mourned for them. And just toward the end of the ceremony, we saw Papa on the edge coming in, and then coming in his navy blues was my brother Dan sneaking in because he didn't have a robe or anything. I'll never forget that moment. Everybody in the auditorium stood up and cheered because here was one of ours standing on that stage. So join me God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Thank you, Poplarville, for always including me.